Almost there. There we go. Now we are live again. Sorry about that, everyone. I was trying to stream through a different software, and it didn't work out so well. So we are back now, and we are just talking about the protest in India over the caste system. And Arjun, you were already explaining that. I'm sorry about we had to cut you off midway through explanation. Please give us the rundown.
Yeah, these goons basically pretending to be Dalits, they sort of jumped into like the peaceful protests, and they brought weapons and all. They tried to start a riot, but they were sort of as quickly as possible. They were controlled. But this was basically an attempt to defame the government, like they are not Dalit friendly and all that. But it's like opinion polls are to believe, Modi has an approval rate in upwards of 85% right now, 87%, something like that. It's a crazy number. So like it's not possible that that this is going to have any effect on the government, because this is also this is also backfiring for the opposition, because they are being sort of they are being put into the framework of being the ones trying to divide Hindu society. So yeah, so in that case, yeah, that's basically what's happening. It seems like it's a big deal, but it's actually not. It's like it's not really a big deal.
I've heard of these tactics used before, especially when we're talking about the press, or as Bull likes to put them, the prostitutes. Great name, by the way. But I've seen this tactic used before, especially when we're talking about areas in different countries. One place I've heard it a lot of times is the Middle East, where the press have bumped up like a situation. They've bolstered a situation that was either worse than it really was, or downplayed a situation, depending on what the events were. So I've definitely heard of these sort of tactics being used before. And as I took a look through before we all came together today, I started looking just a little bit into India's caste system, and it seemed like there was a breakup of 5 different castes in India. And if I can just pull up what I had. Yeah, and so essentially, but it seemed when I was reading through it and these caste systems, it seemed like a lot of the problems, though, what's going on over there are actually really related to what we see over here in one way, in some communities, where one community is being told it's oppressed or that they have a disadvantage, and then you're trying to give them equal advantages, whether that happens to be for work or any other. School would be another good one. So I started to notice that there was this problem that you have the lower caste where they're starting to protest about inequalities, but then at the same time the government has offered a bunch of government programs to offset the inequality at the same time. Yet the protests still go on. It sounds very, very much like a Western progressive protest. Did you just? Your camera just went sideways.
Hello, just 1 second. Just give me a second.
No problem, man. Just your camera went sideways over there.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good now. Yeah. So anyway, like when we were talking about, because the other thing too was I found that when I was reading this article, when it was talking about the deaths that ended up happening in, there was 10 deaths total. One thing too I noticed was that these weren't necessarily one whole group of people that ended up getting killed or anything, but this was actually happening over several different cities or several different provinces. It seemed on average there was only about one person killed in one area. So that was one thing that I found that the press didn't really do a good job. They kind of found they tried to sneak that part into the article. It was CNN, so it was very sensationalist article for sure. But yeah, it just seemed like they were trying to sneak that in. They were emphasizing about the amount of people that were killed. And just me personally, when I hear things like that, I kind of visualize it all happening at once. Like, wow, 10 people were all killed in this giant beatdown or something, kind of visual image that comes to my mind. Except when you look into it, it's very different. It's more likely they didn't even elaborate how the deaths happened, but I'm just using deductive reasoning. I guess it was probably something more like somebody fell down. It was trampled over rather than it was like a vicious, brutal murder in the middle of the streets. But I don't know. Maybe you heard a little bit more about that.
Most of the deaths that happened were not really, they were not at the hands of the police. They were more like stray pelting of stones or like stray bullets here and there, because these goons, some of them, they had guns and they started firing at the police. So it was mostly to do with that, because there was this one case where this one goon who was pictured, the entire news media, when they got hold of that video, they immediately identified who this guy was, because he pretended to be some other from some other community in another protest. Like, he was a professional protester. Like, he, depending on the nature of the protest, he would change his he's like a protester for hire, issue for hire kind of thing. So when this guy got caught, then the whole thing fell flat. But basically it was like it was basically bad intentioned and bad sort of. The end was also like, it was very bad for the opposition in terms of perception, because now they've been stamped as like being the ones trying to divide Hindu society, as I said. And that is not going down well. And this is also currently in the backdrop of that. In the middle of May, there is going to be an election in the state of Karnataka, which is which is in the southern part of India, and that is like one of the last bastions of the Indian National Congress. Like, it's a big state, many seats, and it is like virtually one of the last states, because BJP took 3 states this year from them, and if they lose this, they become like a regional player. They're not even a regional player. They become they become some like number 4, number 5, number 6 party of the country. Yeah.
Wow. So there's really a lot on the table right now for them, eh? Like, if they lose this, it's going to be like then it's a whole shift of power sort of thing.
No, the power has already shifted. It's just that these are the last vestiges, because they are a deep-rooted party. They have got deep roots in the institutions, in the government, in the power corridors of power. So these are the last vestiges of the battle playing out, because for them, it's a battle for survival. For BJP, it's just another state. For them, it's a battle for survival.
So does this sort of go back? Because I remember in our first conversation, you talked about the changes that Prime Minister Modi made to them and how he more or less destroyed the left of your country. So these would be the remnants of what of the work Prime Minister Modi has done then?
Yeah, see, Modi came in with one tagline which said, Congress Mukh Bharat, means India free of the Congress. He just wanted to destroy the left. That was his tagline, that I will free this country, I will rid this country of all the corruption, all the people who are corrupt, who have been sort of destroying the country, eating away at the foundations of the country by selling it, by putting it up for sale, basically. So yeah, so that's essentially like, if he wins in May, then that's it. That's game. Like, that's pretty much game over. That's pretty much game over. Pretty much, yeah.
Damn, man. Wow, well, we could use some sort of shift like that, I find, over here in the West. Or at least I'm only speaking, I guess, for my country, but we're having this exact problem right now, where we've got the left wing, the far left radical politicians that are trying to uproot and tear down everything that we would consider our values, right? At least in my country. I'm sure Bold has a lot of the same problems in America. Just when you have these, and the thing is too, is that I find is they always place themselves as the patriotic ones. These left wings, they always place it as they are the true patriots to their country. Yet I completely understand criticizing your country when it does wrong, but the main job of, it seems, a lot of these radical left-wing politicians and activists always has to do with tearing down what your country stands for and all the values and everything your country has done. Yet somehow the right wing is the one that gets painted, and the patriots are the one that end up getting painted as the radical ones. And actually, Arjun, as I'm kind of looking over the CNN article again, you could probably help verify this, but it was saying, talking about these protests, that tens of thousands of people were protesting across the country. Would you say that's an accurate description of saying tens of thousands of people were protesting? Not even close, eh?
No. Maybe hundreds across cities. Yeah, maybe hundreds, but not tens of thousands. That's like classic fake news.
Well, it is CNN, so it makes sense.
See, CNN's basically become a reality TV program, like a reality TV channel. Like they only engage in salacious gossip and all that, like that Trump peeing in Russia, those pee tapes and all that. They basically have been reduced to that. So like yeah, CNN should be taken with a grain of salt, if not an entire quintal bag full of salt.
I more or less I try to avoid them as much as possible. Sometimes when I'm doing my podcast episodes, they come up. Like I've used them before if like an event just happened and they were doing like the breaking news. I'll be like, okay, you know, I'll use it, but I'll take it with a grain of salt. But I try and avoid CNN like the freaking plague if I can, because I don't see any friggin' I don't see any credibility that comes out of that place anymore. In fact, I really do think if there even was any credibility for CNN at this point, I would say the last shred of credibility for them should have been gone when they were talking about the WikiLeaks documents getting leaked, and they were saying, you know, we are allowed to read those documents, but you're not allowed. So let us tell you what they say. Like that should have been the last shred of credibility. That they should have been gone right there.
Yeah, of all the examples, that's a great example you brought up. But yeah, that was hilarious when Chris Cuomo, I think, said that.
Yeah, I think it was Chris Cuomo. And actually, he had my second favorite line, which is, you know, we couldn't have done anything more to help Hillary Clinton in this election. We really did brand for her, or something along those lines.
Yeah, he should have been. What would have been funnier is if he would have said something. I love Hillary Clinton almost as much as I love my brother Andrew, the governor of New York. You know, it's like you know, I guess he's the most transparent fake that they have on that network. Him and that you know, that bald Humpty Dumpty, what's his name?
Brian Stelter.
Yeah, Brian Stelter.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Van Jones.
Van Jones at least has like a touch of personality to him, but Brian Stelter, I don't know who decided to put him in front of a camera, but anyway, keep going, guys.
The WikiLeaks thing was a big. It was cringeworthy, wasn't it? Like it made me cringe. Like, how can this guy say something that is verifiably false? Like everybody knows, like it's verifiably false. That anybody can access, anybody with a computer can access WikiLeaks. So, like to say that only we can access it, like I don't know, maybe he's not the one who's handling his script.
His statement was different. It was worse than that, because he was saying it wasn't about access. It was about legal right to view it, and he said it's classified information. So it's illegal for the viewers to read it, but it's legal for us because we're the press to read. So he thinks that the First Amendment only applies if you have a press pass. It's funny because I believe in Philadelphia, Jim. So do you believe that I think their main industry was producing press passes back in 1776, right, or 1789, when they wrote the Constitution? That was the main reason they had printing presses, just to produce press passes, right? That's why they needed the First Amendment. Yeah.
Only for the very prestigious press, you know, we would never know anything without them. Thank God for them. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but I saw this one CNN. I'm sorry to cut in here. I saw this one SNL skit where like they had like CNN in diapers, like locked up in a cage at a press like a press briefing from the. I think it was Melissa McCarthy's sketch where she lampooned. What was the guy's name? The press communications director before Sarah Kirby Sanders.
Oh, that would be Sean Spicer.
Yeah, Sean Spicer. Yeah, they lampooned Sean Spicer like with Melissa McCarthy, and they had CNN in wearing diapers in a cage, being called fake news, and that for me sort of crystallized what is CNN, what people see CNN as, not only in US, I think across the world. That sort of crystallized it very, very well. Even though like SNL is a far left thing, and
do you know a lot of people who saw that and had the same reaction over there in India? Was it like was it like a fun? What I mean, did it kind of go viral there too?
It's like people who follow these things, they found it hilarious. They found it hilarious. Like no, but like, see, if SNL is like, it's a niche thing in India, like it's like a late night thing, so not too many viewers. But people who know, are in the know, they understood what's happening. Because see, Trump has played a masterstroke against CNN. Like, he keeps coming up with those memes, and he just destroys the credibility of CNN with every meme that he sends out. And there's nothing CNN can do about it, because they have destroyed their own credibility, right?
Exactly. Actually, that's what I was going to say. I was like, well, to be fair, CNN has helped destroy their own credibility. For instance, like when they were saying that they were planning on doxing that guy who made the meme of Donald Trump with who body slammed the CNN. You remember it was when Trump was doing WWE, and they were like they found this guy and like threatened to dox him and everything like that.
Yeah, for me that was, by the way, the video I made concerning that, which was just me talking on camera, is to this day it's the most views I've ever had by far. Probably, you know, I mean, it's not even close. That was, for me, commenting on that, I saw that people just had this reaction that was basically like ants to you know, a hill of honey. To that story. It was the biggest own goal in CNN's history.
Yeah, CNN has a lot of own goals in its history. CNN has a lot of own goals in its history.
Yeah, the funny thing is that if you look at their record before Trump, they also had some pretty pathetic issues. I think was it 2015? When was the Malaysia Airlines flight? Do you guys remember?
I think it was 2015. Yeah.
Yeah, but Don Lemon said on the air, he started speculating that it was black holes. You know, that
I remember that.
And it's. I mean, I don't know how we didn't notice it before. Maybe I just wasn't watching the news as closely as I do now. But you know, that's the truth. And for many years, I mean, I used to watch CNN and think it was, you know, it's pretty good. I used to go to the gym, watch it, and you know, you just have like this neutral opinion because they don't say anything important, and they didn't say anything. There was no passion to what they were doing, because they were, you know, it was the Obama administration. So, you know, the Obama administration was all about hosting Bradley Cooper at the White House, and you know, other crap like that. You know, hosting Bradley Cooper at the White House. That was the main point of having CNN. You know, Bradley Cooper and Jay-Z, things like that. So. They didn't care, and now suddenly they care about everything. Yeah,
one question I have is, did like CNN become crazier after Jeff Zucker became like the CEO, or before? Like they were already crazy before
that? They really, yeah. I think in terms of their tone, yeah, they did become more crazy. But you know, before Jeff Zucker, their agenda, I think, was the same. But yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking of it. I think because of him, they adopted this aggressive tone, because for a while it was helping them. It was helping them with the ratings, even though they never were able to beat MSNBC or Fox News, because you know, they were just they'd have what's his name, Jim Acosta, out there in you know, pretending that he's actually asking questions, or there was that funny thing at the did you guys see when they went to his golf course, Trump's golf course, and they tried to peek at him through the trees while he's golfing?
Yep.
And then the truck parked in front of it. I mean, I mean, how many, it would be funny just to see how long we could even go just talking about, you know, how many like CNN episodes there have been with there was the Arjun, you probably remember being in India. Maybe you remember, what's that guy's name?
Reza Aslan.
Reza Aslan eating the brains. Oh my God.
Oh God.
that was hilarious. I think if you go to the channel that I depend on to you know, watching CNN, why waste your time? You just go to Mark Dice's channel, if you guys know him.
Yeah,
he gives it to you in like 2 minutes. It's like fantastic. Mark Dice is like the CNN. You know, what do you call it? You know how there's the Facebook Lite app on your phone. So Mark Dice is the CNN Lite app on YouTube. He distills all the garbage in 2 minutes, and then you don't even have to watch him. I mean, everything important is already there. Thank you, Mark. I mean, I can't. I've been like, people probably think I work for him because I've been mentioning him in the past 2 days, like nonstop. But you know, it really is useful just to watch a 7-minute video by him, and you know everything they've done.
That guy has dedicated his life to sort of like trolling CNN. He trolls them on social media too, like even Twitter and all. He trolls them, and he trolls them hard.
He was doing it before Trump.
Yeah, he was.
He was the original troller for CNN.
Yeah, the guy's a pro. There's nothing you can take away from that. Oh man.
Absolutely. Like, I will definitely never discredit him on his content without a doubt. Personally, I do find him a little bit, his approach can be a little bit annoying, but I also recognize that his approach is what's made him, 1 million subscribers on YouTube strong. But the content he brings is really good without a doubt. I would never be able to discredit that.
By the way, just going off topic a bit, like what's going on with the Trump's $150 billion worth of sanctions on China? That's great news for us, at least.
Yeah, Jim. So you've heard about that too? Do you guys watch Styx Hexenhammer? Either of you guys?
Yep.
Yeah, he said. I mean, if we were to actually, leverage our consumer market and just say one day, well, we're slapping these crazy tariffs on China, it would just be the greatest news for India ever. We could just go walk over to India, and India has a lot of industrial space, and not just India too. I mean, there's other countries there, Malaysia and stuff like that. It's not like there's a shortage of labor in Asia or around the world. I mean, that's what people misunderstand. And I'm not an anti-China person. I'm just saying that, I think that the people have to realize that there's alternatives for many of the economic systems that we have today. And what the press is by the way, the prostitute thing, I think I stole from Paul Joseph Watson, so I didn't make that up. But just wanted to mention that. But in any case, yeah, they keep harping on the fact that we do need China, and we're going to have a meltdown if we get into a trade war with them. Well, there's just they don't understand that the idea is that these countries are industrial superpowers like China because they need a consumer market to sell to. The U.S. has a massive consumer market, and I don't think that they'd want to lose out on it. Could it go wrong? Sure, but the idea that we should just keep letting the same globalist trade policies happen is pretty much the equivalent of telling people shut up and stay in your trailer park. That's their message to Americans.
And considering how America is a big exporter for the rest of the world, that's probably not the best idea, especially with Trump in the office. He's not just going to sit there and take some insults from other nations now and not do anything about it. Hell, I mean, he was willing to. I think it was a little bit more of a front to be able to slap China with the sanctions, but he was also targeting Canada as well not too long ago, maybe a month ago, and he had every right to, because there was a big trade deficit, but yet Trudeau was unwilling to recognize it. Like, there was a meeting between Trudeau and Trump where Trump was telling him, like, we got a $12 billion trade deficit, and Trudeau was saying, no, we don't have a trade deficit. But except if you go on, granted this, it was American government website, so I don't know if Canada actually says something different. I'd have to go check that, but it was saying there was about a $12.6 billion trade deficit for America between trading with Canada. So it's not exactly a great idea for the rest of the world to be trying to insult America when it comes to trade, especially because Trump is willing to take a more protectionist stance on it. It's not going to end well for others. Personally, I don't really want that because it would actually be devastating to our economy if Trump just decided to say, screw you, Canada, and slapped a bunch of like 10% sanctions on us. That would actually be very crippling to our economy. So,
yeah. See, I got an interesting story about the trade wars and about Trump personally. Trump came to spoke to Modi about taxes on Harley Davidsons, right, being sold in India. We have something called a luxury tax over here, like where high-end stuff like motorcycles, like imported stuff and all, have upwards of 100% tax on them, right? So it ends up costing twice or thrice more than it actually costs abroad. So what ended up happening was the Harley Davidson CEO went to Trump and said that, Mr. Trump, please help us out. The Indians are taxing us out of business, they're taxing us out of the competition of the market. So Trump called Modi. Now see how Modi handles this thing. Trump calls Modi and says, listen, this 100% tax is not going to work for us. So Modi very calmly says, oh, okay, just because you said it, I'll reduce it by 25%. Right? So Trump became happy and he said, okay, and he kept the phone down. Then he went back to his people and said that, oh, I got it reduced. So the Harley Davidson CEO says, but it's still 75%. That's still a lot of tax. So then Trump got irritated. He called Modi again, says, this is not going to work. Then I'm going to slap tariffs on your motorcycles being sold in America. So Modi says, oh, of course. Just because you're saying it, I'll reduce it to 50%. So he reduced the tax by another 25%, and Trump went back to the Harley Davidson people. And he says that this guy is like bamboozling me. So he came, because he made an interesting press conference after that, saying Modi is a beautiful man with beautiful words. Because Modi completely outsmarted him on the tariff thing and the climate change thing. Because Modi supports climate change, but you won't ever hear Trump talking against Modi. Because Modi has, in a very smart way, sort of balanced what Trump requires in the world and sort of his own position. And this is a contrast which I see, because in the handling with China came at Trump in a very aggressive way. So Trump is a brawler. So Trump went even more aggressive and slapped $150 billion worth of tax. And China couldn't compete with it. And then China started saying that, oh, maybe we should back off on that. Then they started saying we should have mutually beneficial trade. So yeah, there are funny things that keep happening. Which another thing, Modi also is sort of supporting Trump on the security thing. The security, all the security-based issues that Trump wants to get done, Modi supports him. So it's quite an interesting thing, because Trump and Modi talk very often, and for long. Then they have long conversations, and I think, in my view, at least in my reading of it, Modi is one of the only leaders with whom Trump gets along well with. Like as a relationship of equals kind of thing, like politician to politician.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying on that. It seems the rest of the world still tries to give Trump the cold shoulder even now. I mean, I don't know. I feel like by now a lot of the crap that they say about him is like, sure, a lot of it's true if you want to talk like maybe he's an arrogant guy or something like that, but a lot of the other crap is very untrue. But this is actually just affecting international relationships. I mean, I know that when Trump came into office, everyone was saying, well, now we're going to turn to Germany. Like, I know a lot of NATO allies in the European Union were saying like, well, we're just going to turn to Germany instead and they'll lead the free world. But I mean, fuck, look at Germany. Germany's supposed to lead the free world? No way. Like they can barely, right now they have massive protests because of on their streets. Like, I know over the last few weeks I've seen some protests going on in Germany because they're pissed off about Merkel's immigration plan. And how could they not be? You know, I think they brought in like 2 million refugees and immigrants over the last little bit, which is just like caused a lot of social friction between them. So
What's that? Merkel could barely form the government this time. She had to go into coalition with a person she does not like at all. Neither does the other guy, Martin Schulz, like Merkel. Like they are like snake and mongoose have formed a coalition. So Merkel has barely formed the government this time after, I don't know, God knows how many, 8-10 months of like negotiations. They almost had to declare new polls because of that.
Yeah, I think our June. I mean that's like a excellent. It's an excellent angle you're taking that from, because, and I'd like the snake and mongoose Kipling analogy that you brought there. Although he probably ripped it off from somebody who was local, but let's keep going. Yeah, Merkel's situation in Germany. She's kind of lost the actual. She's like the Theresa May of Germany. She's there by default because the ruling party, the internal structures are not ready yet to throw her into the trash after, 16 years almost that she's been prime minister or chancellor. And meanwhile, Macron, yes, in public, maybe he's not as vocal about supporting Donald Trump, but in private, what I've heard is that he gets along very well with Trump in private, probably because the guy is just, he's just in it to cut deals for his own benefit, because he's just a Machiavellian guy, which that's the way many of these leaders are. And then you have whoever's going to be the new prime minister of Italy is going to be a different ball game there. It's granted, we don't know yet because they haven't inaugurated their government, and I don't know if the coalition's been signed yet. And then remember Hungary, I think this week there was another election there, and that guy is empowered. So, the European Union as a bloc is falling apart. People can talk a lot about Angela Merkel being the leader of the free world, but she's almost not even the leader of her own constituency in Germany. It's very much like, there's a saying I remember they used to say about the president of Lebanon that he's basically the president of the presidential palace, and that's about it. That's what people that's the way a lot of these world leaders are.
See, one thing I'd like to say about Macron is that he's not a Machiavellian guy. He's like the Chris Cuomo of France. He's like the Chris Cuomo of the government in France. He's not very capable. I don't think he's too bright either, because he may be a businessman and he was some deputy minister of trade or finance advisor to the Hollande government like about 4 years back. So that guy is he's not very bright. His decisions that he makes, like the way he talks and all, they're very, very bland and dry, and he doesn't have much of a vision for France. The only thing is that, yes, he's better than the Socialist Party and in certain ways, and he's making an effort to sort of change the image of France. But I don't know how successful he'll be.
I don't know if
Marine Le Pen. Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know. At least one thing about Macron that I can respect, at least, is he's on the left, but he's willing to cut deals with the right, like in terms of trade. Like again, like he seems to get along well with Trump. He's willing to make those deals for his country. I can at least respect that, because one thing I have with my left-wing government and a lot of other left-wing governments is that they're more about their ideology, which they want to spread on everybody else. So it's more about, well, we want you to do this. It's our way or the highway. So I can at least respect that he's willing to make that, at least on the international stage, he's willing to cut deals across the aisle when necessary, especially if we're talking about for the benefit for his country, when he's doing what he has to do to make his country better. However, I was just going to say that the changes he is making to France, I don't think he's going to stick around too long, because the changes, I'm pretty sure, are already unpopular. Like there was the big, I think it was about a year ago now, the election between him and there was Marine Le Pen. And Marine Le Pen came pretty close to winning that for a far-right candidate. And one of the reasons was because of between the terrorist attacks that have happened in France, and they're starting to have a demographic change in France because of the massive immigration from 2015. I think that is starting to be one of the main friction points in Europe right now. And so I think if he's going to continue down this path that already seems to be very unpopular, with at least coming up on 50% of the French population, maybe that's a bit of an over exaggeration. I just don't think he's going to be around long, or he's not going to be popular enough. If he's going to continue down this path. Like, I know he's big about diversity. He's big about not integration, but about about the sort of like in a lot of ways like Trudeau, letting it's this culture, it's like the citizenry that has to assimilate to the other cultures rather than the other cultures assimilate to the national identity. So I think that is actually going to root him out of office pretty quickly more than anything else. The trades are nice, but in the end, if the average day-to-day living for the average French folk isn't too, like, they're pretty pissed off, I don't think he'll be around too long.
See, another specific issue regarding Macron is that the security establishment of France, right? The security establishment of France is like, they are the soy boys and the vanilla guys of the security industry across the world, right? Because at one point of time, they used to have this name, oh, we have a counter-terrorist, the world's top counter-terrorist unit, GIGN, we have the Syria, we have whatever, French intelligence. And now, see, that completely went into the gutter when the Paris attacks happened. And then Hollande declared a state of national lockdown. And at the time of the nation of the highest alert, the nation's highest alert in France, they had several more terrorist attacks within a short span of time. With just like in India, we were sitting and watching the security establishment is a joke. Means, and the same thing happened to even England. The Manchester attacks before the elections I think when were the elections? June 2017 were the elections in Britain, when May got elected.
So yeah, I think it was June.
Yeah, and the results were declared after all those attacks, the Manchester attacks, the London attacks, bunch of attacks happened. And then at the podium, she gets up of her podium of her acceptance where she's accepting her win and all that. She's declaring that she's won, and she's going to announce her vision for her government. She gets up on the podium and says, the British security establishment is outdated, and we need to we need to have a harder look at our policies. Basically, she's announcing to the world that England's security establishment is not at par with the standards that it should be at. So which is a devastating statement to make for the newly elected leader of the country to make at one of the first speeches after she's been elected. And the same with Macron. Macron is focused on cutting deals. He's focused on opening the Louvre in one of those Arab countries. He's focused on doing a tour of Africa, but he's not paying attention to the security establishment, which is his primary problem, in fact, as of now.
Actually, yeah, I've been noticing that a lot of world leaders these days have been starting to neglect the advice of their national security advisors. Because actually, yeah, once again, going back to when we first met Arjun Trudeau in India, there's another MP that's just now being investigated because they're saying that he neglected the advice of the national security advisor. And what ended up happening was he was benefiting from, it was like he invited a news organization that he benefited from personally. Yeah, it was like, what was his name? I'll see if I can pull it up right now. But yeah, he invited one of the news agencies, but he was benefiting it financially from this, whether he had like some stake in the company or something like that. Let me see. Liberal MP investigation.
I would like to ask Ramon a question. Hey, Ramon, you got that lady who's been appointed as the new head of the CIA. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, what was that? What was the question?
The question was that the lady who's been appointed as the new head of the CIA after Michael Pompeo is left to become the new Secretary of State. I wanted to know his thoughts on her background.
Go ahead, Bold.
Yeah, I think you might be asking somebody who's a little too biased. I've kind of, through what I've read about the CIA's history, and the fact that she's a career officer, I don't know if I could ever support anybody to lead the CIA, because I've kind of lost confidence in it as an institution. I think it's been corrupt as an institution, since before the Cold War. Now, during the Cold War, it served like a very, obvious purpose. But after the Cold War was over, we should have pretty much completely reformed it from the top down and adapted it to the modern era. It never got done. And a lot of the people who have been managing it, they're still in this mindset that that the CIA should be able to pursue its own agenda, and it's not accountable to the American people. So that includes her, by the way. So yeah, I can't support it, and I'd have to add it to the list of people Trump's appointed that I won't support it. I don't care how many Trump fans are like, oh, you just fucking get over it. I'm like, no, I mean, just because Trump is now in charge of it doesn't mean that the CIA is suddenly a good organization to really trust. I mean, that's my attitude towards it. So I hope I answered your question.
Well, it seems to me that considering how Trump and the main Trump base came in with the drain the swamp attitude, this doesn't seem like this actually seemed like this is the complete opposite of draining the swamp from what I can tell from her. I mean, she's got a lot of questions about, she was getting questioned about torture. I know that was one thing. It doesn't sound like somebody we really want. And then we also had, what's his name? Was it Bolton? The new,
Troy Bolton.
What was his position, Bolt? What
John Bolton? Yeah, John Bolton. Yeah, exactly.
John Bolton. Sorry.
But what was his position again? Like, what did he come in? The National Security Advisor?
Yeah, the new position. That's the one. National Security Advisor.
Yeah. But either way, both these people who just came in, it seems like Trump is starting to turn around. He's not draining the swamp. If anything, he seems to be making it worse.
Yeah, the issue with I think it's two different issues in terms of those two positions, but it's the same issue with the people filling them. With John Bolton, he is a neoconservative, and that's pretty similar to what I think her last name is Haspel. I don't remember her first name. Who's the CIA nominee? Gina Haspel. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, for me, the only thing I can think of is that, yeah, John Bolton and Gina Haspel are poor choices, and that would make it more important for Trump to be his own person and ignore them. But when you appoint people, the idea is not to hope that you ignore them. That's kind of my attitude, and that's what a lot of the Trump bots, the ones that I call them Trump bots, not because they're fake, but because they're pretty much people who say, well, we just have to trust him. He has 4D chess, whatever. Well, that was the attitude of a lot of people who have been voting Republican for years, no matter what moron has been leading the Republican Party. And I think that if you look at the way the political landscape has changed, there's fewer and fewer of those people around. There's more people who have awoken to the reality that it's not about party affiliation. It's not about what corporation they've worked for before. You have to have people that bring in ideas that are going to change the dynamic, and neither of those people does it. And I'm not going to pretend that I support Gina Haspel because Donald Trump said so. I mean, what am I, some sort of trained monkey or something?
Well, Trump isn't some hidden genius, like I do think that the press makes him sound like, they make it seem like he's dumber than he really is, but I don't think he's playing 4D chess all around, like I think that's ridiculous to sit there and think that, like you're talking about these Trump supporters say he's playing 4D chess, we need to trust him whenever he does. It's like, not at all. We don't have to trust him in every move he makes. Personally, I think in some moves he has made, I think they've been strategic moves. Maybe he's played the other side of the aisle well before, but this is just all part of the political game. And considering how Trump has spent his life in business, that seems more like a business move than like a business strategy than anything. So I think it's wrong for those people who are just going to put it all down to Trump as he's playing 4D chess. He knows exactly what he's doing. I'm like, he knows some of what he's doing, but again, it's not like he really had a life of politics before this. Some of this he's still learning as he goes. So I think a lot of people are just putting a little too much trust in Trump. I mean, let him try and stimulate the economy, sure, but people can't really. People who are saying that the omnibus bill that he passed was saying like that was some strategic move by him. That was no, I just thought that was a bad bill to pass rather than anything. But people are still like holding on to this thought that it was part of his master plan.
Yeah, you have I think you have a more realistic perspective, and that's kind of it agrees with what I think too. The people that are saying, well, you need John Bolton in there. He's gonna. I mean, those are essentially people who want Trump to be governing like a traditional Republican. Now, what I will say is that the strength of Donald Trump, it's not the 4D chess thing. Okay, the strength of Donald Trump is that he knows how dumb and pathetic his opposition is, and that's where his real advantage is. He knows how to manipulate them and get them to make greater mistakes than he would be making. He's done this for such a long time. I'll tell you what. So the moment that I realized that this guy could be president and he could succeed was during the election when he went and visited Mexico. It was to me watching him go to the stage with the president of Mexico and towering over him, and he just swooped in on that opportunity. Within a day, he just flew over there and did it. That was a display of his abilities, and it pretty much was like he bowled a strike against the Democrats, because Hillary Clinton was too lethargic, and she was also taking it for granted that what do I have to go to Mexico for? I already have the vote of Mexicans. Well, she doesn't understand that the image of going and meeting a foreign leader was very significant in the eyes of a certain number of people. I'd include myself. I don't know how many people there were. That, I think, is an episode of 4D chess. But appointing a person who it looks like you were forced to appoint, like John Bolton. No, I mean, I agree with you guys. Now, if he can, what I would say is, if he can get these people in, and then he basically says to them, okay, now you work for me. And if I see you doing things that I don't like, yeah, I'll fire you too. That I would say is I'm fine with that happening. But people are saying, oh, it's good because she'll make the CIA tough again, not like with Obama. Oh, Obama made the CIA tough for people who want to keep their information private. That would be called tough. Wouldn't you guys agree? It depends what people are, in what context people are thinking about it. That's the way I look at it.
Obama betrayed a lot of the things that the Democrats are supposed to stand for. I mean, one thing that was supposedly, and I actually thought for a long time this was more of a right-wing authoritarian type thing to do, was a police state. Yet under Obama, a left-wing Democrat, we saw the police, like the military capabilities of the police expand between armored vehicles and more military-grade weapons getting forced into the police force. It was actually under Obama where we saw the greatest rise in tensions between the African-American community and police. So Obama really did betray a lot of the things that the Democrats are supposed to stand for. And I'm surprised that more people can't see it. You just have to do a little bit of research to figure it out. Because I remember with the first time that I got out of my bubble with Obama, and I decided, like, when I was still on the left, and I got out of my bubble and I said, okay, well, let's look into some of the criticism of Obama. It smashed apart the image of the man, like within just like 10, 15 minutes of a video, it's just people would say, well, this is what Obama said. Here's what he did. This is what he wanted to do. This is what he did instead. And for me, it was like, again, 10 minutes listening to a counterpoint smashed the complete picture of Obama, which to me just tells me that a lot of the people on the left just are very ill-informed, or like me, they were just getting all their information from one source, which was putting you in an echo chamber. I was stuck in an echo chamber for a few years.
Can I quickly jump in on a point there?
Yep.
See, Obama is, it's not that he went back on his promises. Obama is a very intelligent man. There's no question about it. And whatever he did, it was a strategy. It was not that he went back on his promises or he betrayed the people see, all his moves, if you look at it in totality, like from an outsider's perspective, like from whatever I have seen, it was mostly a strategy which I think most people agree today, like to where he wanted to shrink the capacity and the capabilities of America and the influence of America worldwide. He wanted to sort of like close up shop and it's like Israel closed up shop in the across the West Bank and then came back to this side of the river. It was like that. So Obama was very interested in reducing America's footprint in the world. And everything, and in fact, the situation between the police and the black community, that was all. That is my reading of it. That could also be sort of very sort of calculated in the sense that if a distrust regarding an institution sets in deep in a community, then they are more likely to remain dependent on a savior type personality like Obama wanted to project himself. That is my reading. That means that is my sort of understanding. And as far as John Bolton is concerned, the man may be a little hardcore, but like you can't argue with his results. He got North Korea to talk about denuclearization, so you can't really argue with the results. Yeah.
Hold on. Okay, yeah, my mic's on. I thought my mic was off, but yeah, I think the Trump doesn't need John Bolton in order to do that. I think he's perfectly capable of that. To be honest with you, if Trump wanted to appoint, somebody like one of his old wrestling buddies, like the Ultimate Warrior National Security Advisor, and basically have him, eat ranch chips all day and do nothing, it would be fine. I think that that national security advisors that he has that are of value. I think John Mattis is a advisor of value. He's Secretary of Defense and his Chief of Staff. Kelly they're people of value, and John Bolton I think is kind of he's just not a part. I don't see the value of bringing him in, except for getting some of the never Trumpers to fall apart. Now, as for some of the stuff you said concerning Obama, and I think both of you guys, that there's a lot to what you said that it tells exactly the story that we were living here. If you talk to people who supported Obama and never abandoned him, they don't know what the fuck he did. They can't explain a single thing he did that actually helped the country. They say he did gay marriage. They'll say it's something like that. He did gay marriage. That's not, he didn't do it. It was the Supreme Court. Barack Obama didn't do gay. I mean, assuming you support that, which, I don't, yeah. Why would I give a fuck? I hate going to weddings. So, for me, it's just worse. Potentially I'd have to buy more gifts. So why is that a good thing? Then you get to what's the other thing that he did? Oh, Obamacare. You asked them to explain Obamacare, and they can't do it. They for the life of them, you'll usually get. I don't know if you've ever asked this question, or either of you guys, to a Obama liberal. They'll say, well, Obamacare was a step in the right direction towards universal health care. And then you ask them, but what does it actually do? They can't tell you the answer. They can't tell you that it's basically the creation of a subsidized, price-fixed insurance market that's heavily, dependent on state corporate welfare, that also needs massive budgets for advertising and uses state government budgets too, federal and state governments, in order to prop it up and even make it solvent, which it's failed to do. They don't know that. For me, what I've done, and then when you stop talking to them about that and they're too pissed off, you show them, I'm showing this image. This is what they look at. They basically have a religion. This is the Obama Christ, for those of you that they have this image in their mind that he's basically our Lord and Savior come to deliver us from, the evil war on women, Republican crypto Nazis or whatever. They're saving us from the, the twin devils of the Koch brothers or something. That's their philosophy. That's the extent of their philosophy. And I dare anybody who's an Obama supporter if they're watching, to prove me wrong on that assertion.
One of the most telling things about Obama, which I came to know, was that during his campaign, there were the big corporates who ever donated to his cause. There was one was, I think, Citibank or something like that. One of those banks, big banks. They made recommendations regarding appointees into his cabinet, and I think 80% of whoever these guys recommended made their way to become Obama appointees. That was a very telling thing about Obama. So yeah, so Obama's entire thing, even with Obamacare, Obamacare is a very fascist thing, actually. If you really look into it, how the government did it, it's a very fascist principle. Fascism basically is state-controlled capitalism, right? The government sort of directs the company policies, who they hire and fire, and stuff like that. So Obamacare, like, the government basically told this is what I came to know of it. The government basically told the insurance companies that you charge whatever premiums you want, we'll subsidize it, right? So, and it was basically a con sort of played on the people, and not to mention that he was the one who recommended the firing of those big companies, the GM, the CEO of GM, and all these guys. He recommended the firing. So, which should send alarm bells ringing in anybody, in any economist, any academics, in any person in society's head, saying that why is the government deciding the employment status within any company? First of all, you're bailing them out, which is anti-capitalist, which is against capitalism, basically. Okay, capitalism is based on merit. So you are doing a more socialist thing and then adding a bit touch of fascism by deciding whether the CEO stays or goes. So yeah, Obama was a slick operator. Like, he's a very, very smart cookie. He was very smart cookie at least in the way he did things. And his portrayal game was on point. It's anybody who can convince the people of the things he convinced the American people of, I mean, he can sell he can sell anything. Obama is a very interesting character. I'm sure Bold agrees with some things I said.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's Obama to me sounds a lot like the stereotypical snake oil salesman. He came in offering change, and of course, he didn't actually say what real type of change, but, it was heavily implied a change for the better. And he did bring change, but it brought America in the complete opposite direction. I mean, between the surveillance and, again, I guess I've already mentioned the police state, but he did it very well. And I suppose one thing that actually I think that gave him, I guess, is actually a significant advantage is the fact that the press was so heavily on his side. And that was also a lot of the international press, because I've said before that Canada doesn't really have the same conservative, like mainstream conservative news networks like they do in America. For instance, like, at least you have Fox News, and Fox News is still part of the mainstream and they're still terrible. But, at least it is a conservative representation in the mainstream. We didn't have that in Canada, so everything was very pro-Obama. I mean, we did hear criticism. I mean, one of the big criticisms I would say we heard about was Obama and his drone strikes during Iraq War. That was one of the big ones that you'd hear criticism for. But all in all, it was just a very positive pro-Obama message. So you weren't really being told everything else. And I suppose for me, one of the reasons that I didn't know more at the time was because after high school, I actually more or less got off social media. Like, I was on Facebook for a while and I just kind of stopped using it, and I didn't really do anything with it. So I for years I was not online, so I was just getting things like if I wanted my news, I'd have to go to and I'd either read watch my local news or read a newspaper, whatever it happens to be. But yeah, it was like after when I started getting more active online, I decided to, everyone always told you need to get opinions from both sides, So I was like, all right, well, I'm on the left. I might as well start listening to the more right-leaning sources and see what they have to say. If anything, at the time I was doing it for argument's sake. You need to refine your arguments. Little did I realize it actually made me transition from being a liberal all the way over to, well, I don't really know what I'm classified as today. I just usually, if anyone asks me, I just say I'm right wing, because I don't know if I'd necessarily be classified as a conservative. I probably would make a terrible libertarian, even though I hold a lot of libertarian views. I know that if I was actually to speak to a true libertarian, they'd probably tell me I'm a terrible libertarian. So I just say these days that I'm on the right. But yeah, it's really looking into Obama. Go ahead.
I think you have to change your attitude. I mean, remember, he might have bombed Yemen and he might have bombed Syria, but Obama, he went on the Ellen show and he showed us the true abilities of a leader. And there's no disputing that. So I think we're missing the real objective of having representative government. I mean, what do you guys? I mean, did you guys miss this? I mean, doesn't this compel you to vote for the guy?
I would.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You gotta have a leader who got moves like that.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to hold on 1 second. You're gonna have to get on my level though, bro. Hold on, there it is. Yeah, there it is.
Wait.
No. Slow down.
1 second.
Oh God.
Where? I don't see it.
You don't see it? No?
No, I really don't.
Ah, damn it. I guess the screen share isn't working, but it was just there's a picture, a video of Trudeau in India, and he's just dancing to the music that's there.
I'm looking at the stream. It didn't show it.
No, okay, hold on. I'll put the link in the chat so you can kind of check it out on your own time.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Arjun. That was just true. Like the dancing itself, I don't mind the dance. It's just Trudeau was doing it terribly. That was really the real problem.
It was a little on the nose, if anything. Little on the nose.
All right, hold on. I got it right here. There you go. That's in the side chat for you. So if you want to go check that out. Oh yeah, sorry. The dancing got me sidetracked. We were talking about what were we talking about? Obama?
Yeah.
Yes.
Fascist policies.
Well, tell you what. Why don't we take a chance to switch this up a little bit? But we're still talking about because we had the chemical attack in Syria, and now from the way things are looking, there's been a lot of prick waving between Trump and Putin right now, and Trump is starting to threaten repercussions in Syria because of that. And I can't remember where I saw the article, or maybe it was just a comment that was made on social media, but someone, as they put it, they said Trump went full neocon on the situation in Syria. And actually, what about the chemical attack? What do you guys make of that? Because I don't know, it seems suspicious to me that right as everybody's going to pull out, Assad would then choose to gas his own people. I mean, I believe the attack happened, but do we actually believe it's Assad?
Yeah, it's okay. From the Indian perspective, it's not Assad, right? From what we know, and one person you can follow is a independent Canadian journalist called Eva Bartlett. She went to the country of Syria, and she roamed that place, and she interviewed the common people and asked them about what's going on, right? And it was very insightful. So, like many news channels, national news channels in India, they send their reporters to Syria to cover what's going on, right? And when they were interviewing the common people, there was nobody who had a bad thing to say about the Syrian army. They, in fact, were pissed with the rebels. They said that the rebels were attacking, right, to destabilize the regions. To destabilize the region they were attacking. In fact, the Syrian army would protect them, right? And and this chemical attack is actually a sort of okay. The genesis of the Syria problem is from this issue of an oil and gas pipeline which Saudi Arabia wanted to build in that region, which Bashar al-Assad he refused because, well, he's a Shia, he's an Alawite Shia, and the Saudis are Sunnis and they can't stand each other. So what Saudi started what the Saudis started doing was they started like arming these rebels, and they started sort of like encouraging Al Qaeda and ISIS to sort of recruit and start attacking the country. So, and even Hezbollah, even Iran got into the act for some reason in Hezbollah. So now the thing is that from here it just became worse. Now America started, then USA got involved, then America started arming the rebels, and Putin got into the act by starting to support the Syrian government, and it became a right mess. It became a mess. So but when this Eva Bartlett character, she interviewed the people, she said that the people, when they voted for Assad, it was not they agreed with him on certain policies, disagreed with him on many policies, but it was never a case where he was a dictator, like he was oppressing and repressing and suppressing the people. It was never like that, and that which seems to be confirmed by the Indian media reports, because they went and they found that the people were very grateful to the army for keeping them safe. And it was not in one area, in all these places, Aleppo, Ghouta, and all these places, all means across the country, people respected the army. In fact, there were instances where where people told stories like the rebels, you would ambush the army, and the people, and the army would sort of close ranks around the people and protect the people. So yeah, and for some reason, I don't know why the Western media is sort of propagating an obviously alternative narrative of this, whatever is going on. Now, see, now what I'm saying is, well, subjective, right? As is the narrative in the Western world, in the Western media. Because, yeah, because I'm not in Syria, I don't know exactly what's going on. But from what I can make out is, yeah, that maybe that Bashar al-Assad may not be the dictator everybody thinks he is, and certainly there were no chemical weapons that he had at any given point of time, because there have been UN inspections of Syria and they never found chemical weapons. So I'm guessing the chemical weapons, I don't know where they got chemical weapons from, and who gave the rebels, because it sounds like the rebels got hold of some chemicals and they sort of released it into the public, or they attacked a place which had stored dangerous chemicals and then that got released into the public. So it's unclear. It's very unclear right now. But evidence as of now sort of supports that Assad may not be the dictator he is made out to be.
Because yeah, I was wondering about that, because like, I mean, our Western media has been very critical of Assad, and you know, you got to take everything that they say with a grain of salt. But all in all, I will admit that I haven't been the best at keeping up with the events in Syria. So I'm just trying to piece everything together now. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of the details in there. But yeah, that was the one thing that I have noticed over the last little bit, was just that there was this report of America, Trump saying, okay, we're going to get out of Syria. And then suddenly the chemical attacks happen. And then there's a ramp up of everything that's going on in there. Yet it would be disastrous for Assad to do that. Everyone's claiming, and the only other people right now that are claiming that it was, I believe all the information, the people on the ground were saying that it was the white helmets, right? And the white helmets, I know, have a very they have a very gray background. Like I think they a lot of times have been involved with I think they've had members who have been extremists before in the past. I need to look more into the white helmets, but I know that they have a very shady past, and they're the only ones who had boots on the ground claiming that this was Assad making the attack. And I don't know, I've seen some videos that have come out since then, and it's like them standing next to the canisters. And I do admit my ignorance that I know I have never really been exposed to any images or anything of a chemical attack, but it just seemed like there was still, despite the fact they're standing there in gas masks, it still seemed like it was staged to me for some reason.
Yeah, see, Syria is a very confusing place, right? Because it's a Sunni majority country being ruled by a Shia minority, right? Right, and that too, like even amongst Shias, they are a minority. They're like, and this guy, he got elected in a presidential election, even though his father was also like the president of the country for many years. But the fact is that once he took over, he stood for election. Now now if independent journalists are, see, even Trump probably understands this to a certain extent, and he wants to get out of Syria, right? Because last year, remember, there were like several, like 60 odd missile strikes that he ordered in against in Syria, I think, right? If I remember correctly. But that seemed to be more of a move against China than Syria, right? Because nothing of value was destroyed in those missile attacks. What happened was, at that time, Xi Jinping was visiting the US, and prior to that visit, he had been like shouting in the public sort of international fora that US should not get involved in Syria because China might decide to join the Syrian effort to oust the US, and he was saying things like that, like inflammatory stuff. After that, Trump, there was this interesting thing about that piece of cake and the cake eating incident and all that. What I hear happened was that Trump offered Xi Jinping a bit of cake at that bilateral meet, and while Xi Jinping was eating the cake and had the cake halfway in his mouth, Trump leaned in and whispered into his ear that he had ordered 60 missile strikes in Syria, and Xi Jinping just froze like that with the cake halfway in his mouth. So that was like more of a power move on China than an attack on Syria. So basically, he wanted to show Xi Jinping who's boss. So I understand that Trump wants to get out of Syria, and he's not in favor of what's going on because it's become like a mess, or it's become a mess which nobody can control as of now. And because like America on one hand is fighting ISIS, but on the other hand, through Saudi Arabia, it is arming the ISIS representatives in Syria as a rebel faction. That becomes a sort of a diplomatic sort of that becomes a nightmare in the terms of perception that US has around the world. And as far as the media coverage of the Syrian crisis is concerned, that there are many videos on YouTube. You'll go and see that like outlets like BBC and all, the Syrian people just lash out while they're shooting whatever the reportage. The Syrian people just get angry and lash out at these people and saying that what are you portraying Syria as, basically. What information are you giving out? Basically, catching them red-handed, saying that you are giving out false information. Right? There are n number of videos like that on YouTube. So yeah, so Syria is, I don't know. It's very unclear. It's unclear yet and on the other hand, there's Vladimir Putin and Turkey. Now Turkey has no option. Turkey has no support in the world at all from anywhere. That like nobody supports Turkey, and so Turkey has attached itself to Russia to what it thinks is a big player, and Putin is an ex-KGB guy, and who has very successfully ended up isolating his own country in the world. So yeah, it's very unclear that which side is doing what. It's a mess.
Boy, this is just gonna, like, I was hoping that by now we would have an end to the Syria war, but Yeah, it looks like we're going to be in it for the long haul. In fact, everyone now is claiming this is the beginning of World War III, which I think is just way hyperbolic. Not at all. I don't really think that. I think this is just a war of words between Trump and Putin. It's not really going to descend into anything more than that. It just seems it would be very naive for, I think, to Trump to send in the full military force over this and risk going to a full international war just for this sort of for the chemical attack that happened, just to essentially play Team America, world police. But what about you, Bold? What do you think about this take? What are your take on Syria and what Trump wants to do?
Yeah, as far as the approach, I think I agree with both of you folks. It's the same idea that this, for me, I don't look at decisions like this from a moral angle. I look at it strategically, and the cui bono question, who benefits, and for me, the benefit, like you were alluding to, is the white helmets are, to my knowledge, they're affiliated, I believe, with Al Qaeda. So yeah, I think that it's, the landscape that I see around, I see people both on the quote left and right who are voicing the same concerns that both of you are saying, and the people who are in favor of it are people who have traditionally supported the military industrial complex, defense contractors, that type of deal, oil industry type people. And I think as far as Assad himself, I mean, that's where sometimes I have to balance my opposition to this war to the idea that no, I wouldn't support Bashar al-Assad's regime. There's plenty of people here, by the way, who are huge Trump fans who think, Bashar al-Assad is a worthy leader, that he's a great person who defended the Christians of his country. Well, the Christians of his country wouldn't be in the mess that they are if he hadn't conducted himself and his dad and his entire regime. They hadn't conducted themselves the way they have for the past I think it's 50 years. I think his dad came to power in 1970, and it's a sectarian regime, like Arjun was saying. It's a regime that also people talk about certain other countries, and I know you want to get to that oppress oppress self-determination of indigenous peoples. Well, what about the Kurds of Syria? They're people who have been suppressed for years until I think, I don't even know if they have, but for the entire existence of Syria as an independent state, the Kurds never have possessed citizenship. So that's not a representative state. That's right. So they might have changed that, though. So I don't know if you can even say better late than never here, because it came at the point where the Kurdish problem actually became an armed conflict, and they actually control part of the country, and the Syrians are actually dependent on Turkey getting involved in the conflict in order to curtail Kurdish independence, in order to keep Kurdistan a part of Syria. That would be what would have to happen, that they would somehow link efforts with Turkey, who have been funding Al Qaeda in the past, and it shows that there is no actual good guy in this conflict. That's why last year when there was the strike, and I guess we're here for Predator 2 this year. When there was a strike last year, I said that for Trump the solution would be to do what Richard Nixon did in Vietnam, which was called Vietnamization. You convene an international conference, could be a secret conference even, with Iran and Turkey and Russia, and if they'd agree to meet with Israel and with Saudi Arabia, and they would all agree on a staged withdrawal of all foreign forces from Syria. That, in my opinion, would be the only way to resolve the conflict. And going in there as far as intervention is in my opinion, the opposite of that solution. So there's one other angle I wanted to consider. People are saying, well, why do we have the right to interfere in an independent state like Syria, which is sovereign? I agree 100%. I wish Syria agreed with it too, because Syria has interfered in Lebanon for decades. They've basically treated it like their garbage dump. they've interfered in several countries. In Jordan, they've interfered in Israel. They've interfered in. They basically use the Palestinians as their pawns. You know, they sponsor a number of militias. So yeah, notwithstanding all of the horrible record of Assad himself, yeah, I don't believe in the invasion either. I think it's completely anybody who thinks it's a good idea is full of shit. They're basically just supporting, you know, the defense and the defense contractors. That's my opinion.
Now, what reason, though, because after the chemical attack, Israel ended up carrying out a couple airstrikes against them in response. But I was curious, what reason would Israel have to retaliate? I do realize that Syria is right along the Israel border, and maybe it could be that it's they could perceive a threat there of possible chemical attacks being used against them. I could possibly see it, but I wonder if you two had a different take on that.
Yeah, about Israel. The Israel thing is it's pretty much Israel is being attacked by Hezbollah, right? As the Hezbollah, Iran, and all these guys, they hate Israel. So they have the Shias. As I see, Shias are basically trying to out fundamentalize the Sunnis, right? So Iran and Syria and all the Shia countries, they want to be more Muslim than the Sunnis. That's a complex that they have. Like it's a like 2,000+ year old thing. So when the Sunnis say that like we hate Jews, Iran and Syria and all these countries will shout from the rooftops, "We will murder all Jews!" Like they're each trying to one up each other. And Israel's position in this is very interesting, especially like since the ties between India and Israel have started warming up. What I feel is going on right now is the Middle East is on edge right now, because any day they fear that any day India, Israel, and US and other Western countries will declare support for the Kurds to form their own nation. So that affects Turkey, that affects Syria, that affects Iraq, that affects all these countries, and they don't want that, right? And right now the Kurds are very well equipped and well trained, also they're battle hardened, because the Kurdish Peshmerga forces have been fighting against ISIS for the last so many years. So they don't want a situation where Kurdistan is a possibility, where and about that and this is all also connected to that. This also comes after the fact that Trump extended his support for that embassy in Jerusalem, right? So he doesn't want. So these guys, the sheikhs, don't want Trump to extend his support to the Kurds. and with India also, it's a similar problem. They are all the time trying to wheel and deal with India, say please don't support the Kurds. And India has a very good, and they give India concessions on oil and stuff like that. So as far as the Kurds are a problem for these guys, and as are the militias and all this. See, Syria supported a bunch of militias, but it's the eternal Shia Sunni problem. Like these guys are basically tribals. Yeah, these are various tribes, and these tribes are all the time fighting amongst each other. And the Syrian conflict was essentially a tribal conflict between the Saudis, the Syrians, and the Saudi tribe wanted one thing, the Syrian tribe refused, and then they started scratching and gouging at each other's eyes. That's basically what happened. And America sort of got caught in the fact that Saudis went to America and said, please help us. Because Syria is such a problem, they need to be taught a lesson. You can bring democracy. So US felt that, oh yes, we will bring democracy, and then they found that it was a shit show. It was a shit show, and they've since been trying to find a way out of Syria. Yeah.
What about you, Bold? Why do you think that Israel made that airstrike?
Yeah, Israel struck Syria before, also for a number of the same reasons that Arjun was talking about. Usually what they'll what they'll try to do. I don't know if it was in this case. In this case, it's kind of unclear, and it might take a few weeks to hear exactly why it was. But they usually get some sort of leaked information from forces there, either within the Syrian army or other sources, that there's an arsenal of something that's of interest to them that would be passed to Hezbollah. And I think that's the extent of why they usually strike there, if they do. And that's what I see as the motivation. Now, it might have been ill-timed, and they might have taken advantage of the fog of what's happened with is it Duma, where this happened, in order to strike there. But it's not like I can really pinpoint it. And I think it could have been a huge mistake. I think it might be that they'll come to regret doing it. And that's kind of why I was having people who were messaging me, and they were like, "Fucking awesome! They fucking bombed them." I'm like, you don't even know why they bombed them. I mean, why are you celebrating? It's like, it's a reflex reactions. That's my opinion to the way people are taking that.
I could also see a more reflex reaction coming from them, considering the area that, like the environment that surrounded them right now, like between the Syrian war and then the constant, just everything that goes on in the between Hezbollah, Hamas. I could definitely see them being a little more ready to jump,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think the city, I think the base that they attacked with the airstrikes was Homs. Homs. And see, Israel is basically probably helping out US in this whole thing, providing air cover for US operations, right? Because there'll be like bunch of special forces guys and probably CIA guys on the ground, which Israel was probably covering for. That is a possibility. Because otherwise, Israel has its own problems, and Israel couldn't care less about what happens in these places. So yeah, it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it looks like there's still at least some rising tensions, because just an article out of The Guardian I just happened to come across said that apparently US and Russia failed to reach a UN agreement as tension rise. Not that I'm really expecting the UN to solve anything, like I've always I've used the term the useless nations to describe them, because I just think they fail so heavily in what they want to do. Now, I'll give a little bit of credit that their more humanitarian missions have gone well, better, I'll say. But a lot of times when they're trying to jump in and either bring an end to military conflict or try and end whatever, a social or cultural riot, genocide, whatever you want to say, they've always failed in every situation. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock in the UN being able to resolve this situation. That, and they just infringe on sovereign nations' rights, But that's just my personal opinion on the UN.
See, the UN has become so far left. It's become an institutional. It's become like a clubhouse for the global left more than anything else, right? Where they do their they throw their leftist parties, and they drink and eat their leftist goodies. And that's all it has become. See, UN. See, that's why Trump has had such great success with bullying the UN. No, he just said, "We'll cut your funding," and immediately these guys just sort of came into line, right? But I would say this, that woman trying to prosecute the US military for war crimes in Afghanistan, that is a move by the UN in retaliation to Trump's move to cut funding.
Well, everyone should have realized that how bad the UN is when they decided to put Saudi Arabia on their Human Rights Council. I think that says it all right there. And I can't remember. I feel like it was either Iran or maybe it was Saudi Arabia. Again, there's like another country that's like, again, that's terrible for women's rights, and they put on like the Council for Women or something like that. Maybe I'm misremembering, but yeah. Yeah.
There's so many of them. There are so many of them.
There really is, yeah.
I think Sudan was on one time.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Sudan I'm thinking of.
Yeah, one of the world leaders in female genital mutilations, I think.
Oh, Jesus. That's not funny. I shouldn't laugh.
I don't know, man. Like, if you're number one at something, you gotta run with it.
Yeah.
But, sorry, I had to troll there.
So see, if they're putting people who are like, see, I'll give you an interesting story. Like the state of Goa in India was a Portuguese colony, right? And this is in 1961, after years of negotiating, I think 12, 13 years of negotiating with Portugal, Portugal refused to let go of Goa. And India, then what the Indians did was that we sent in the army. We sent in about 45,000 troops. We sent in like overnight in 24 hours. Now the fact was, at this time the UN was passing resolution after resolution saying, oh, Goa is an integral part of Portugal. So the UN has a very checkered history when it comes to, as you said, sovereign rights, human rights, and also one very interesting thing. Cultural genocide was included as one of the things that Western countries or any country which is part of the UN should not indulge in while sort of dealing with other countries. But at inception, what they did was they removed the phrase, that paragraph, that clause that included cultural genocide as a form of genocide. They removed it because at that time they were very upon the fact that Western values should be propagated throughout the world at the cost of the local culture also, if at all. So the UN has a very checkered history regarding rights of any kind.
They contradict themselves all the time, even on their missions. Because the one mission that the UN undertook that I never ever let go is the Rwanda mission. And the thing that kills me about it so much was the fact that the UN peacekeepers were in Rwanda. They were seeing what was going on, and their leader, I think it was I can't remember his rank at the time. Maybe he was like a colonel or something. Romeo Dallaire was like, he was contacted the UN General Assembly and the Security Council, and he's saying, this is a genocide. We need to do something about it. And they kept just telling him, no matter, even he would say like, I want to make a one thing he wanted to do is he knew a warehouse where there were some arms that were being supplied by the Hutu government to the people in order so they could genocide the Tutsis. He wanted to take his troops and he wanted to make a strike against it, shut it down. And he was full out told not to do it by the UN, and he was told, you're only there to keep the peace. Well, fuck, what more could you really ask of the man if he's trying to stop a genocide? They're saying you're trying to keep the peace. It's not keeping the peace by standing around and just watching thousands of people get cut down with machetes or gunned down with AK-47s. Yet they wouldn't recognize it as a genocide. They recognize it as a problem, of course, a crisis situation, but they wouldn't recognize it as a genocide until after everything had ended. Because if they had recognized it as a genocide in the UN General Assembly, well, then they have to do something more about it. But from as far as I can tell, they willingly didn't. They willingly were refusing to use the word genocide. They were very, very unwilling to even really talk about what was going on in Rwanda in open assembly. And because of that, 1 million people were killed. And it's just, that's what the UN is supposed to do. It's like, that's what they founded themselves on. And they can't even succeed in the most basic mission, in a most obvious situation. And one of the problem was that the UN peacekeepers weren't aware of their rules of engagement. There was one report where 10 Belgian soldiers were killed because they were under fire for 2 hours but they didn't know, they were so unclear with their rules of engagement that they weren't sure that they were even allowed to fire back. In the end, they end up surrendering to the government forces and they hand over their weapons, and then the government forces gun them down right where they stand. And this is just part of the legacy that is the UN failure.
This is where this was where?
This was in Rwanda in 1993. Yeah, the Rwanda genocide, 1993. By the end, it was over a course of 100 days. Really, the genocide. It led to a civil war, and there was a total of about, rough estimates, of course, but the highest estimates number put about 1 million that were killed during this genocide.
Yeah,
I see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw. I think a documentary about what you were talking about. Was Ghost of Rwanda? Have you guys seen it? I think it was from PBS.
Yeah, I saw it.
So, yeah, that saga with Dallaire, that was like one angle of it, and it was very clear that they were sent there basically to be kind of cardboard cutouts and nothing more. And then the other angle that I saw, and it's so ironic because it's relevant to what's going on right now, is that we had Madeleine Albright was the U.S. ambassador to the UN at the time, and people were talking, she was hyped up as, this dignified woman who was, I think she was the first female ambassador to the UN from the U.S., and the people made like a huge deal out of that, and she was basically Hillary Clinton's bunkmate buddy on every single issue, still is to this day, even though she's like super old. So, she was basically showing up to Security Council meetings and, whining the whole time without using the word genocide, like Jim So saying, because they wanted somebody else to step in and do something. They were hoping, I believe they were hoping France would do something. I think France eventually did do something, but it showed that basically after Somalia, the U.S. didn't want to be involved in any international intervention, no matter how awful it got. And the person in Ghost of Rwanda who makes the harshest criticism of Madeleine Albright, I mean, could you guys guess who that was?
Dallaire?
No, wasn't Dallaire. The person. How about you, Arjun? Did you see the movie?
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay, so the person who featured several times was named Samantha Power, and Samantha Power became the UN ambassador to the UN under Obama, and she basically, everything that she said was wrong about Madeleine Albright's conduct with regards to Rwanda, she repeated it with regards to Syria. It's almost as if she just borrowed the script from Madeleine Albright and just did the exact same thing. It was pretty surreal watching it, because with Syria as well, they were complaining for since I think since 2011. I think Samantha Powers was the UN ambassador for most of the Syrian war, and she was just complaining and complaining and complaining at the UN. And eventually Russia got involved, and the U.S. is now complaining that Russia got involved. Well, you had the chance to intervene when it was a little less complicated. You didn't do it, and then you kept complaining until eventually, there was the fall of Aleppo. I remember that I think it was the Chicago Tribune or the Washington Post came out with an article in December 2016 when it was the end of Obama's term, and they were saying, yeah, Aleppo is going to be considered the greatest failure of Obama foreign policy. There was a picture of her. If I could find the article. Gary Johnson, what's Aleppo? Let me find it. The article.
I don't think it was the greatest failure. I don't think it was.
Right, but I mean, this was a huge thing, because it was reported on for months and months that this was like the big deal, and that Aleppo was, this is from a top columnist from the Washington Post. They were calling it that because people were basically raising this issue for months, that the city, or I think it was under siege for 2 years, and then eventually the Assad's forces broke through the rebel lines and destroyed them all and obliterated them. And the Obama administration was just talking about it in the UN for such a long time. And at a certain point, I think even the blind or the willingly blind people of the Washington Post, they had to acknowledge that they talk a good game, but they don't really do anything. The Obama White House.
See, Obama's greatest failure, I would say, which I don't think he would agree if I were to say it to his face, would be his classification of terrorists as good terrorists, bad terrorists, and calling many of them freedom fighters. I think that has set back the foreign policy consequences by many years, especially in Afghanistan. It's a terrible thing because there he called the Taliban freedom fighters, hardcore terrorists oppressing women, female genital mutilation, you name it. He called them freedom fighters. So it's, and on the other side, this is the thing about Obama. Obama's past, his dad was like this radical communist / anti-colonialist. So Obama got many of his ideas from his dad. So yeah, Obama had this anti-colonial thing in which he saw these people as oppressed by Western hegemony and whatnot. Yeah, that would be, I think, his greatest failure. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm like at least for me, like I understand like that you think that's his greatest failure. For me, I almost think it's his, like, my opinion, his greatest failure might have been considering how he came in, especially I think early on, and he recognized some of the real problems with some of the minority communities. Like he recognized some of the problems with the Black community, yet he never made any changes to try and fix that. At least for me, I would say so, just because it's more focus on the country as a whole. But depending, I'm sure there's a few other events that happened under Obama's watch that if someone wants to remind me about them, I would consider that a bigger failure too. And I mean, in a lot of ways, if you want, I don't want to sound too like war hawkish, but in a lot of ways, letting ISIS grow may have been also considered one of his big ones, if you want.
See, ISIS growing was bound to happen, right? Because after the fall of Iraq, after the fall of Saddam Hussein, Iraq was basically a free for all for any guy who chose to wear a turban and a cape. So yeah, so Baghdadi was more. It was more of an expected thing, and Baghdadi, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, under him the amount ISIS grew, it was expected that it was bound to happen. But the thing is that his attitude regarding terrorists, and I am only talking about failures as far as foreign policy is concerned. I don't know about him personally or the entire extent of his administration's activities in the US, so I can't take a call on that. But this classification of terrorists has had far-reaching consequences in the world of counter-terrorism. Now, one thing is that okay, he supported Gaddafi, right? US had a policy of supporting Gaddafi, which he continued. To a certain extent, then he turned his back on Gaddafi, but that was a hard decision that the US had to make to support Gaddafi, even though Gaddafi was a brutal dictator. Because Gaddafi kept the lid on these fundamentalist sort of African migrants from just spilling over into Europe. That was the aim of supporting Gaddafi. So yeah, Obama's foreign policy, as far as counter-terror is concerned, was disaster. And then he set his sights on the wrong person. He set his sights on Iran, where he should have been focusing on Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all these people are the ones who support ISIS, are the ones who fund all these Al-Qaeda guys and all terrorist organizations. Iran is just in cahoots with Hezbollah. Now, like I said in that last chat we had, you can't, even if you Google it, you won't be able to find, apart from the Houthi rebels and the Hezbollah guys, you won't be able to find Shia militias, any Shia terrorism. You won't be able to find it. A globally designated terror organization which is Shia, you won't be able to find it. So the US has to set its sight on the real problem, which is Wahhabi and Sunni Islam, which is supported by all these countries, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and all these countries. And
I think the real
shift their focus.
I was going to say, just when we're talking about the extremist groups, I think one thing as I've just been sort of looking a little bit more into the history of Islam, I was thinking is why we may see more extremism that comes from the Sunnis rather than the Shia may have to do with the right after the history when we're talking about the death of Muhammad, because I know that the Shia believe that the fourth caliph, because after Muhammad's death, there was, I believe, 4 caliphs that stepped forward into as his successor. And the Sunnis believe that the 4 caliphs, all of them were legitimate. You know, that every one of them had every one of them was his successor. While the Shia were the ones that believed that it was only the 4th caliph. So they believed that it was more hereditary. And because of this, I think this actually opens the door for the Sunnis, because they believe more in, like, it's not about a birthright. It's more about, it's almost an elected position more. Maybe elected isn't the proper way to put it, but it opens the door for more extremist individuals to take charge of a group such as that. And like, whether we're talking Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, one of these extremist groups, it opens the door for one of these radicals to come in and then shape those sort of groups into a more brutal form of Wahhabism.
Yeah, but see, the fact is that the Shia Sunni conflict, yeah, that was a part of it. The hereditary, the caliph thing was a part of it. But the main ideological difference between the Shias and the Sunnis, Sunnis believed in superiority by force. They believed in in conquering lands, the Sunnis, whereas the Shias believed in the moral superiority spread through in the cultural expansion. So, but at that time, the Shias and Sunnis war, and then they sort of the Shias lost because they were in minority and all that. So yeah, it's a big complicated history.
It really does seem the difference between hard and soft Islamization then.
Yeah, exactly. But see, but since that period, the Shias have been just trying their best to sort of appear as Muslim as the other Arabs. Basically, that's their game. That's the basic necessity. That's their psychological need. That's all it is. Shias are very simple that way. But Arabs, the Sunnis, especially the Wahhabis, the Salafis, they are much more
much more extreme, you mean, eh?
Yeah. They believe in the destruction of humanity. They do. It's the death cult version of Islam, what the Wahhabis and the Salafis believe.
I can believe it, because sort of what ISIS wanted to do in and of itself was just, it seemed to be the embodiment of Salafism. It really was. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that, gentlemen, we're approaching about the 2-hour mark, so I was thinking about ending this in the next few minutes. So I was just curious if either of you had any last opinions, any last ideas.
Yeah, you wanted to address Gaza. I thought maybe you had some questions about that, but
oh yes, that's right. I actually did forget about that. Just yeah, we can quickly cover Gaza. Yeah, just essentially, as I was kind of looking into everything that ended up happening over, I guess it was again starting about beginning of April or so. I saw some of the videos that came out. I've been reading sort of both the articles that came out of there, and I've been trying to get a better understanding. Now, it seems to me like we're looking at the sides that are more pro-Palestine. they're making it appear as if it was a completely peaceful march. You know, it was just the citizens. It was no big deal. And then Israel just opened fire willy-nilly on them, which is not true, because clearly we have seen, I've definitely seen the videos, and I've seen the pictures of members there who were carrying weapons. There's also was that report that when we had, I think it was there was a number of Palestinians killed in one day, and about half of them turned out to be Hezbollah soldiers. So this idea that it's simply a peaceful march for the return march, I think they called it, is
Hamas soldiers. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, my mistake. Hamas. Yeah, you're right. You're talking about Gaza, not the West Bank. Yeah, so it was Hamas soldiers. At the same time, though, when I was looking at everything, I felt like it was a overreaction by the Israeli soldiers to open fire on people 300 meters away. I do realize that the Palestinians were warned not to approach the fence, but there was a lot of injuries and a lot of people that were shot that day. So I'm wondering, was that a failure on the rules of engagement more than anything? Way I look at it, I think it was just a bad PR. It was a bad PR all around for Israel, though, I have to say. It was not a good image for them.
Yeah, so speaking as somebody who, you know, I did serve in the West Bank. Hezbollah is in Lebanon, but the issue with a mass demonstration so first of all, you have to talk about what the goal of the demonstration was. And the truth of the matter is that this was called openly the March of Return. And what the hell does that mean? You know, we have here the March for Our Lives. What the fuck does that mean either here in America? You know, there's the March of Return. It means that they were telling, and this is from Electronic Intifada. Okay, so this is not this is the pro-Palestine side, and they call it the March of Return. And why do they call it the March of Return? And they even have, you know, pro-Palestine Jews reporting on it. This is from Nora Barrows Friedman. Their belief is that the status of being a refugee is transferred hereditarily only for the Palestinian people. If you talk about the Muslims that migrated from India to Sindh, which is in currently Pakistan, they're not considered refugees anymore. Likewise, the ones that migrated the other way, the Hindus and Sikhs that migrated to India, also not considered refugees anymore. There's also the ones that migrated from Turkey to Greece in the early 20th century and vice versa due to population exchanges. So they believe that this is their idea of what refugee status means. Everywhere else in the world, once a refugee has died, their children are citizens of whatever country that they've just chosen. So if you're a Mexican and you choose to move to the United States for economic reasons, and you're an economic refugee. That's the way you're considered, and then your children are automatically citizens of the United States. That's their philosophy as far as that is. However, with the Palestinians, even though they fled a conflict, mostly willingly, in 1948 and then in 1967, they can never become citizens of Jordan or of Egypt or even of and even the countries where they do receive citizenship, like Italy and Denmark and France, they're still considered refugees even if they have citizenship. What a concept! You guys, the comedian Yakov Smirnoff.
Yep.
What a country, America loves Smirnoff, the March of Return was an organized effort on the part of the administration in Gaza, which is they are disputing the legitimacy of the Palestine Authority, and there's an internal conflict between them, and it was used as a vehicle to say, well, even if the UN is not going to impose the right of return on the Israelis, we're gonna have our people, march to the fence, cut down the fence, and run into Israel and take their homes back. And they had people running there with, and that's basically what they did. And so they were willing to take the loss of life or the loss of, and people who were wounded, a lot of people wounded by snipers, in order to basically have them as cannon fodder for a concept that they think applies to their situation, but no other place in the world. So that's basically their perspective of it.
Yeah, but one question though. What homes are they marching back to? I thought the original homes were razed like to the ground. Like they were just atomized. They were just completely removed, weren't they? What homes were they marching back to?
You can't think of this in logical terms because a lot of those people, they still hold on to these keys. There's the I'll bring up an image of it. So they hold on to the so-called keys of their ancestral home, and that's the big symbol. Let me see if I can just get the photo here. So their whole point is, we have the keys to our home that we left behind in Jaffa in 1948, and that's what they believe in. But since then, there's still Arabs living in Jaffa who didn't flee the war. If it was an ethnic cleansing, then all of them would have been expelled. Parts of Jaffa are really, there's a lot of, where my family came from over there, where they lived. Akko has a major Arab population. It's a multi-ethnic city, multi-ethnic. Some of the schools are integrated, some of them are not. Haifa, where I lived for a while, there's a large Arab population, a very vibrant Arab theater culture, literary culture there. Arabic language culture thrives in Israel because there is freedom of the press and freedom of expression to some extent. I wouldn't say it's as good as here in the United States, but it's much more free than people would be under the impression if you read Electronic Intifada. So in any case, what they do is they have these people, they get them all up in arms like soccer hooligans and say, yeah, we're going to have you march to the border and cut the fence down, and then we're going to rush in, and then you take your homes back. Well, exactly like Arjun's pointing out. I mean, it's been, almost, yes, I think this year it's going to be 70 years to the War of Independence. And things have changed. I would be surprised if somebody who came from Sindh and moved to India would go back to their ancestral, neighborhood wherever it was. I mean, would they find the same thing there? I doubt it. It's just being realistic. Countries change. I think that it's unfortunate that people can't take a pragmatic attitude towards solving this conflict. When I lived there, there were a lot of Palestinians that, on a personal level, I thought they were pretty cool people, or Israeli Arabs too. But on a societal level, they are basically just the most easy people to manipulate, whether it's by other countries, Iran, or by their own leadership. And this was the textbook case of it. Yes, you're saying PR move is bad. Of course, it's a bad PR move. It's the Israelis. They don't know dick about PR. They don't know how to explain themselves. They think that also that their conflict is the most important thing in the world too, and they're dependent on this foreign aid, and that's why I've never supported many of these organizations in the U.S. that they're called Israel advocates, AIPAC or Hillel. Or there's other ones. I mean, you could probably talk to Analytical about them, who we all know. Those organizations, they have kind of a tunnel vision. They don't see that the foreign aid has handcuffed Israel. It's because of the foreign aid that we're in this situation. If the country had believed in sovereignty and independence years ago, and actually been true to its vision. As I guess the Zionists originally intended, that it would be a free nation in its land and not just a pawn of another country. Maybe we would have a much better relationship with the United States, probably a good relationship with Russia too. And I think that in the 90s they should have started to say, look, we're trying to develop our economy. The foreign aid, we're going to let go of it, but it gets addictive. It's almost like a heroin addiction on a national level. foreign and defense aid. And many of the people in the defense establishment there, the way they would have it, they would be dependent on foreign aid forever. You know, they get consultancies for some of these companies when they finish their military career. It's really a shitty situation. Furthermore, you know, the real issue here is that's why it's important, like I said, to just keep an independent perspective. I think, you know, both of you guys, I think you have the same attitude as I do. You know, you don't necessarily, I mean, Arjun, you don't reflexively support everything that Modi does, right? I mean, and you yourself, Adrian, you don't support everything that, let's say, Doug Ford says. I mean, you kind of analyze the situation, see if it fits your perspective on the issue. I wish there were more people with respect to the Israel-Palestine conflict that, you know, develop that type of attitude on both sides, by the way.
I think just the problem is, oh, do you want to go ahead, Arjun?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one more question. See, one thing that blows my mind is pro-Palestine Jews. The pro-Palestine Jews blows my mind because, see, when Netanyahu came to India just a couple of months back, see, I understood the mindset of I got an insight into the mindset of the Israelis, right? It is not about like being a free nation or anything like that. It is more about survival right now. At least for the last 70, 80 years, it has been about survival since the World War. Like after 1/3 of your global population is decimated in the Holocaust, like it automatically, the entire mindset of your entire community, the Jewish community, becomes about survival. And like to see that mindset of survival still there, it sort of like made me a little sad because, like, see, Israel is one of the only true democracies in the Middle East. It is one of the only true democracies in the Middle East, if not the only one. Yeah, now that Turkey is with Erdogan, I think Israel is the only true democracy in the Middle East.
Technically, Lebanon would be one, but yeah.
Okay. So this entire thing about like the Jews just want to protect themselves, but on the other hand, the Palestinians, the Arabs, all these guys, they just want to kill the Jews. So I don't understand this thing about pro-Palestine Jews. I don't understand this. If you could explain that to me, that'd be great.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that, and you know, I'll try to do it, you know, without going too long. Maybe one day we could do a different discussion about that, because it could really, you could really go into some inside baseball on that. But the unfortunate truth is that, you know, even though I'm not like a huge person that, you know, I thump on the Bible and I talk about the Bible all the time, I am a religious person, and I look at my Jewish identity as based on the faith and based on you know, appreciating exactly what the story of what a Jew is. The word Jew comes from Judah. Judah was one of the sons of Jacob, and if you become alienated from that perspective and you look at Jewish identity as a cultural or ethnic or racial identity, that's what leads to the bullshit that you're talking about. It leads to basically dissociating your heritage from a belief system and turning it into something about you know, matzo balls and crappy wine that you serve on holidays. That's basically their perspective on their Judaism. So it becomes weaker and weaker, and it becomes and I don't know, maybe Adrian, you have the same thing to say about being a Canadian, because I see a lot of Canadians are not very up on you know, Canadian culture the way, for example, Jordan Peterson talks about it, which I think is fascinating with him. You know, you have to have something that is a core you know, set of principles that sets your identity up. Okay, there's people who try to establish a black identity in the United States. So there were the 7 principles of Ubuntu and all that. If you remember from the 70s, of the Black consciousness movement, that's why there's a Black identity movement. But it's built on nothing. It's actually built on a lie. But they at least gave it a try, and you have to hand it to them. When you look at the progressive Jews who believe in, the right of return, and they are anti-Zionist, and I'm not a Zionist, but I'm not an anti-Zionist. These people they are completely misinformed, and they've morphed their identity into a cultural and ethnic identity of Judaism. And this is the logical conclusion. They don't believe in monotheism, and they don't want to investigate it, even if they don't believe in it. There's at least in the eyes of many people, at least there's a curiosity about it. Among these people, no, they're basically atheists, like Sarah Silverman, who they've dissociated themselves from the concept of religion at all. They look at religion as just a bunch of superstitious crap, and nothing more than that. So they look down their noses at people who belong to any religion, except ones that are special cases, which we all know about it. So to them, their religion is on a yoga mat. Their religion is in a one of those nice chai lattes that they buy. And when they see images of these people who are coming to the border, as in Gaza, and trying to breach the fence, and they're yelling things that are, Chaiba, Chaiba, Ya Yahud, which is reminding the Muslims of the Battle of Khaybar, where Muhammad did slaughter a tribe of Jews. Well, they don't care about that, because to be honest with you, the idea of religion to them is kind of just a distraction. And, they are just deluded. A lot of them, I think they have a perspective that this is part of the great upswell of popular Marxist social justice around the world. And some of them pay attention to some of these smaller fringe groups within Palestine, or their Palestinian society, that are, they're Marxist, like the PFLP, if you've heard of them, which is a Marxist Palestinian group. So they're really.
Could you repeat that name?
PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
Oh,
yeah.
Popular Front, huh?
So some of those groups, they still pay attention to groups like that, even though since the 70s they don't really have a real foothold on any power in the Palestinian militant universe. That they've been in decline for 3 decades. But Layla, for example, I'll pull up her image. I know I'm doing a lot of show and tell today, but this is still a person who, this is the Guardian from 2001. Wait, hold on. Maybe I'll find something even more recent. Yeah, here this is from this is a +972. They were very they're a very pro-Palestine organization and news source from Israel, and they interviewed Layla Khaled, who was a PFLP hijacker from 1972, and they even showed her on a couch here with the photo of her with the Kalashnikov rifle. And they're asking her questions as if what she did is not relevant to anything that's going on today, because the character of the Palestinian cause has shifted from Marxism, as it was in the 70s, to Islamic, what would you call it? Like spreading the Islamic faith and creating a theocracy. That's basically how it's changed. So these people know they can't adapt to the modern times. In fact, they're the anachronisms. I'm not the anachronism. I'm not the anachronism. You guys are more up to date with the current times than these so-called progressives are.
Well, I also find that you mentioned a couple minutes ago that you said that a lot of these atheist Jews, they don't seem to care when when in the Middle East they shout death to Jews because they don't really identify with them. I actually think that's a dangerous point of view for them to take because they may not, they may differentiate themselves from religious Jew and cultural Jew, but I don't believe that those who are calling death to Jews will differentiate that. If they consider you a Jew, then they'll just, if they're calling for your death, then you're dead. It doesn't really matter whether you consider them atheistic, if you consider yourself an atheist. In fact, actually, that may even turn out worse for you because I know they don't hold the non-believers in very high regard either. There's a lot of violent passages concerning those who don't believe. So if anything, they're just giving themselves a double whammy and they're completely ignorant to the situation.
Yeah, they're ignorant to Jewish history as well, and I mean, there's a history of that. I mean, in India, there were forced conversions into another religion, and it didn't eliminate Hinduism. It didn't eliminate Jainism either. There's a lot of religions in India, but these people, they believe in that the progress of humanity will lead to the abandonment of superstition and religion. Well, the perspective in Spain in the 15th century was that the Inquisition will create a society that is wholly Catholic. That was progressivism in Spain at the time. So yeah, they forced a lot of these Jews and Muslims, by the way, to convert forcibly to Catholicism. And what happened? A lot of them, they practiced in secret or they publicly adopted Catholicism. And that's how the Inquisition started, because a lot of the Catholics began to say, and this happened, I just saw in India, you mentioned Goa, that actually happened in India too. Yeah, the Goa Inquisition, which is kind of strange, but they thought, we'll just adapt publicly and, we'll play along and, we'll sneak through. Well, when people don't believe you or they just hate you viscerally, or they're trying to find, more of a selfish, they have a selfish motive in mind, and they'll find an excuse to get you. Yeah, the anti-Semitism can still be used as a weapon against you by people who may not even be hating Jews. I mean, the motive is irrelevant. The fact is that it's a tool that can be used against you, and by saying, they could say also by the same measure, they could say, today I think actually I believe in Presbyterianism. No, nobody's going to give a shit. They'll still look at your last name, or they'll look at your genealogy, and they'll point it out. They do it all the time on the alt-right as well, and they'll do it on the left too. And that's why I've supported figures like Nigel Farage, who believe in the legitimacy of every country in the world to seek their own sovereignty and pursue their own relationships with other countries. And I think that's the one that's best for every country. Israel would be, if they would adopt that type of mindset, would be good. If the Palestinians adopted that mindset, it would probably also be good. I think that's a fantastic way to look at the world.
But Israel did offer a truce many times. They offered to go back to the pre-1967 borders many times. They have offered to integrate Palestinians, and not to mention the fact that it was never mandatory for the Palestinians or the Arabs to run away from Israel, right? They were brainwashed into running away by other Arab countries. So,
right.
so I don't understand this sort of. And you mentioned Sarah Silverman. They try to dissociate themselves from being Jewish, but the fact is that it doesn't stop them from using their Jewish names to make it in an industry which is heavily influenced by the Jews, right?
Well, they're not dissociating themselves from being. I don't know if I heard the entire question, but they're not dissociating themselves from being Jewish, but they're using. Yes, Sarah Silverman is very proud to be a Jew, but she's not proud of, but she's openly, she doesn't care about Judaism as a concept. She cares about Judaism as an identity, and to me, Judaism as an identity is kind of it's like an empty. It's like when you get let's say you ever get a big package in the mail and it's just a bunch of bubble wrap and inside it is something. I mean, let's say it's 3 feet by 3 feet, but inside of it is just like a pack of batteries like this. So that's basically the value of an identity. And an identity without any real philosophy and beliefs behind it is virtually useless. I mean, imagine if you know, there. I'll tell you a good analogy, and this is where I'll, you know, I think we can move to wrap up if Adrian's fine with it. But during the 2016 election, I had a friend who was Indian who I worked with, and he was a huge Bernie Sanders supporter, even though we worked for a large corporation. And he was telling me, yeah, you should really. And this guy was like, in his own private life, he was very, very capitalistic. But he claimed that he believed in Bernie Sanders and everything. So he said to me, you should support Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's very important, and he's going to change the world. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Support Bernie Sanders? I mean, the guy is basically off his rocker. He wants to bring universal health care. Nothing I believe in is shared by him. So he said, well, he's Jewish and so are you, so you should vote for him. So I said, well, remember a couple months ago, there was Bobby Jindal, who was a Republican nominee, and he was an Indian American, and he was governor of Louisiana. Didn't you say to me at the time that the guy was fake Indian? He said, yeah. So I'm like, well, I mean, let's kind of refresh that conversation and apply it to Bernie Sanders. The guy will only mention his Jewish heritage in the context of the fact that he grew up around some Holocaust survivors, and that things related to that. You know, that's the way it is. To me, I focus when it's about Judaism. I do focus on issues within philosophy. You know, the Bible that I think are important. You know, I read for example, the book of Jeremiah is one that I read a lot. I've read a lot about. You know, there's concepts in you know, between, you know, whether it's more of a legal religion or spiritual religion, things like that. It's a much more broad conversation than the way Sarah Silverman addresses it, which is yeah, I mean, she said some pretty disgraceful stuff about other religions too. So, you know, I think with that pretty much that encapsulates what their connection is with the whole issue.
Alrighty. So I was thinking we can probably move to some final thoughts. And just what I was thinking, what I have to say on the just the whole issue with Palestine and Israel is, first, I feel like when we're talking about how the situation is so bipartisan, I really have to think this has to do with the way that is presented in the media. It seems that the left wing, you have to be pro-Palestine, and a lot, at least if we're talking like mainstream news for the right, you have to be pro-Israel, and there doesn't seem to be much middle ground. I know that I've seen just about the same hostility from both news sources on the subject. I've seen Sean Hannity lay into somebody who was more pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. I've seen left-wing, like the Young Turks and others, lay into pro-Palestinian peoples, pro-Israel, those. But I find one of the big problems is that when we're talking about, especially when Israel was for like the first real founding of the state of Israel, so we're talking 1947, I believe, if I remember, or 46. Anyway, I find that one of the problems that people of today do is they try and attribute our mindset of today to those times. And what I mean by that is because even at the time when all the original war happened with Israel and Palestine, the 1948 war, a lot of people, first of all, we need to recognize that Israel was being surrounded by several different armies, so that they were in a position where possibly having another genocide committed against them was a real possibility. And since then, I think one thing that people need to understand is that when we're talking about the situations that have happened since then, people want to talk about the West Bank, and then they talked about the occupation of Gaza until it got pulled out, is that at that time, we were also dealing with a time when the idea of ownership of a territory by conquest was still, at least if it wasn't like these days, that's not really it's not really recognized in warfare, the idea of capturing someone's territory by conquest. But even at that time, that was still much more recognizable. So when people want to talk about how Israel but they went in and created a legal occupation, I think they need to take in consideration that, first of all, there was going to be a very possibility that Israel would have been wiped out. And second of all, it's a completely different time back then to the way war is now. So I think people need to take that into consideration. finally, what I did say is why I have seemed to, like, I do try and stay as critical as I can of both sides, but one reason I do end up on the pro-Israel side was actually because of, you guys maybe have heard of know him, Sam Harris.
Yeah.
I listen to Sam Harris's podcast. I still like Sam Harris, even though I'm more on the right now, and he's more of a liberal. I still like listening to him. But one thing that he talked about when he was talking about the situation in Israel that I never considered before is he said the reason he supports Israel is he says when I look at it this way, if tomorrow Palestine lay down their arms, what would happen? Probably nothing. It would more or less be life as it is now. But let's consider the other option. Let's say tomorrow Israel laid down their arms and said, we're not going to fight anymore. It's very possible that Israel would be completely wiped out within 24 hours, 48 hours if they were refusing to fight and defend themselves. So I think that's one of the big differences that has to be taken into consideration. Finally, nobody ever brings up the Khartoum Resolution, which was signed in 1967 by the Arab League. And this one was where it was stating what became famously known as the 3 no's, which is no peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiation with Israel. How are you supposed to negotiate with someone if they're not willing to recognize your very existence? So that's really, I think, my final thoughts on the matter.
See, yeah, to continue on that, but see, Israel has offered peace terms and resettlement terms to Palestine as late as 2008, 2009 to the former Palestinian president. What's his name? Anyway, I forget now. But the fact was that he said, okay, we'll consider it, and then he went back and he never returned to the negotiating. So it's not that Israel is absolutely not interested. It is the other side who are not interested. And as Bolt pointed out that these guys have moved towards Islamization, right? And as far as the anti-Semitism angle is concerned, the only people more anti-Semitic than the Islamists are the Marxists. Karl Marx was a famous anti-Semite, even though his dad was a Jew who converted to Catholicism or Christianity. So, yeah, so the left and the Islamist combine is a very, very dangerous combine for Israel and to its very existence, because both ideologies are founded on anti-Semitism. And as far as the Indian perspective on the Israel situation is concerned, India has been a long time supporter of Israel. Like when the Israelites ran away from Egypt, India gave the ones who got separated from Moses' tribe ended up in India, and they made them their synagogues. We took care of them. An ancient tribe of Jews lives in the northeast, and they have mingled with the local tribe, the Kuki tribe. They are thought to be one of the lost tribes of the Jews, and they even to this day they sort of practice an archaic form of Judaism, and they have been living in India for the past anywhere between 27 and 30 odd centuries. 3,000 years they've been living there. So. And another point, Haifa, the city when it was under attack during the World War, it was defended by 100,000 Indian soldiers who were part of the British Army back then. So India and Israel have had a deep connection going back thousands and thousands of years, and we really feel for the Jews in Israel because it doesn't, because one of the first things I saw was that how much of an issue of survival it is for the Jews, because when Netanyahu came, when he spoke about he spoke to India with in a tone that was full of relief behind them. It's such a huge democracy is now supporting Israel. So yeah, Jews of Israel need a lot of support, and the left and the Islamist combine should not be allowed under any circumstances to set the cultural tone of that country, because I'm already seeing that because of westernization, Israel is losing its connection to its Jewish roots somewhat. At least that is what is visible from my side. So Israel being the only true democracy in the Middle East, in my opinion, it should be encouraged and supported. It should be encouraged and supported. But one question regarding that I had for Bold was that, see, there is like a community of Jews called the Ashkenazi Jews, if I'm getting that pronunciation correct, right? Am I pronouncing that correctly? The Ashkenazi Jews. There's a huge like community of Ashkenazi Jews in the U.S., right? And the same community has is much smaller in number within Israel. So, is there a difference in like the Jewish tribes, like Ashkenazi Jews, have a different like take on the situation and that, and then the like Israeli Jews? Is it something like that?
Can you repeat just the last part of what you asked?
My point was that the Ashkenazi Jews, there are like 5-6 million of them in the US and about maybe 1 or 2 million in Israel, right? Like, is it a like a community within the Jews? Is it a sub-community thing that the Ashkenazi Jews don't really support Israel? Because I see a lot of anti-Israel, almost venomous propaganda coming from the Jewish community in America.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny question, and I think we could do another podcast about this sometime. But answering it very briefly, I'd say that there is more of a frequency of Ashkenaz Jews to be behaving the way that you're talking about it. I think that a lot of them have internalized the same white guilt symptoms that you see in white liberals, and they're probably I think there is no more there's no more classic example of a white liberal than the Jewish liberal. Like some of these people who like, for example, Katie Halper, who appears on TYT and the Jimmy Dore show. I don't know if you watch the Jimmy Dore show, Adrian, but she would be the classic example of that type of person, who is exactly what Arjun's talking about. But no, if you're talking broadly, the Ashkenazi Jewish community, those are simply the way the Jewish communities are subdivided. The two largest ones are the Sephardic and the Ashkenaz, and the Sephardic is very, very, very much subdivided among the ones that lived in different Muslim countries. Like my mom's family was from Iraq. And the Ashkenaz communities are a little more, in the U.S., for example, a lot of them are assimilated. So it's a little more frequent that you see people like that who come from Ashkenaz communities, and that in Israel, I'd say that there is a little stronger of a leftist tendency among them as well. And I think it's because of the effects of Marxism and liberalism within the intellectual sphere and postmodernism, and you can observe it if you look at some of the papers that come out of academia over there and over here from those people, that they're pretty much just ensconced in it, and like I said, that overrides and completely supersedes any Jewish religious identity that they may ever have had, if they had it at all. It could be that some of these people, any belief or knowledge of religion ended 2 or 3 generations ago, and that, I think, is the root of it. And if some people think differently, I mean, it's up to them, but that's the way I look at it.
Fair enough. All right, gentlemen. Anyone have anything else to add before we sign off?
Yeah, I'll try to do this in like a minute. If you look at my screen, hold on. This is Biafra, also a country that in 1970 separated from Nigeria. And then I think in 1967 they separated from Nigeria, and then they had a huge bloody war where Nigeria put down the Biafran separatists and reintegrated in it. And this was, the Biafrans were Christians mostly. They were from the Igbo tribe, and the rest of Nigeria is majority Muslim. There's never been any march to support restoring Biafran sovereignty. Did you guys see that, by the way? Or
no,
sorry. Yeah, here. Can you guys see that?
Oh yeah. Now I can see it.
Yeah, this is the conflict, and it was a major international conflict of the 70s, and I think I believe it was like in the millions of people starved to death. So yeah, there's never been any massive UN condemnation of Nigeria for it, because they looked at it as an internal Nigerian matter, and it's the same. And Nigeria is a state that was created by colonialism, and I mean Pakistan was too. They occupy part of historical India in Kashmir, and China does too. China occupies the Aksai Chin. I had another graphic of that up. I'll show that real quick before I wrap up and stop. Prolonging the stream, but yeah, look at that. If you can see it, there's this red area is occupied by China and India. I've never seen a march to reclaim the Aksai Chin. Isn't that strange? Isn't it bizarre that there's no video on TYT asking for the Aksai Chin to go back to India, or vice versa, to give the rest of it to Pakistan? I mean, it's almost surreal that they have this singular focus on one country in the world. That's about it for me. So sorry to keep prolonging it, Adrian.
Oh, no, not at all. This has been a great conversation, guys. I've had a great time. So yeah, if you guys want to get back together soon so we can continue this and keep it going, because I know we were saying we wanted to touch a little more on progressive Jews. So if we want to do that again soon, let's do it. Yeah?
Yeah, I'd be thrilled. Yeah.
All right, awesome. And again, Bold, if you prefer hosting sometime, no problem. We can do it on your channel too. Just, I don't know if you have preferences, but just in case.
We'll set it up. We can probably find another person to join in too. Maybe Halsey.
Sounds good. Yeah, I gave AC a message, but I don't think she got back on the Discord. She's probably working or something right now anyway, so.
Okay.
All right, awesome, guys. So we'll talk soon, and we'll set up another stream, all right? Thank you very much for joining me today. And for everyone who was tuned in to watch, thank you very much.